Stephen A., lots going on in Dallas for Mark Cuban and the Mavs. Is it time to focus on Cuban more here?
I think it is in this respect. I certainly don't want to focus on him with something like this. There's been nothing about Mark Cuban that says to me that he's anything less than an upstanding individual. He's one of these individuals. He's in your face. He will let you know where he stands and how he feels. He's unapologetic about it. But in terms of ethics and morals, there's been nothing that I can see where you can question him in that regard. As it pertains to Ussery, in interest of full disclosure, I'm incredibly sad at what I'm hearing. And what I've heard before. Remember, he departed from the Mavs and went to Under Armour. The head of HR at Under Armour is a former head of HR here. Her name is Kerry Chandler, one of the most brilliant executives you'll ever find. She is something special, and she is the real deal. And she was ecstatic about bringing him on board and then ended up making sure he got up out of there inside of 2 months.
Wow.
So she doesn't play. And so, it's one of those situations where you're hearing the kind of things that you've been hearing and you've heard it about him from some time. And then when you hear what had transpired in Dallas, of course you're going to look at Mark Cuban because he's the owner. Mm-hmm. He's the owner and the buck stops with him. He's the man that led the Dallas Mavericks out of an abyss, ultimately into contention, ultimately to an NBA championship in 2011. He's also somebody for fame, Max, on the show Shark Tank, which is a big-time show. And we know what he brings to the table. We know that this man's a billionaire because of his brilliance and what have you. But when I say look at him, I'm thinking along the lines of basketball. Obviously, you can't ignore this either because he's the owner and the buck stops with him. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that the reason why we have to look at Mark Cuban is because on too many occasions, he was in the mind's eye when it came not just to sports, but to business. And we looked at him because he always had something to say. And yet the Dallas Mavericks have been relatively quiet over the last few years. And that's a reason. And now this is propped up. And anytime you hear about a guy that was with the Dallas Mavericks for 18 years and there's a plethora of things that was going on at that particular moment in time, how can you ignore Mark Cuban? You just can't. You got to at least ask him, and he needs to at least talk about it, any way he chooses.
I always say the fish rots from the head down, right?
Okay.
But I, like you, like Mark Cuban a lot. I like interacting with him. Even though we both questioned how successful the Dallas Mavericks actually have been through the years, considering it's a warm weather city, no state income tax, Hall of Famer, people like Dirk Nowitzki, teammates get along with, et cetera, et cetera. How come they've never been able to lure a free agent, et cetera? But that's all like kind of on the court of play competitive stuff. And they've done well. They have won a championship. And Mark Cuban is a character we all know from TV, and we've interacted with him here at ESPN and other sports outlets, media outlets. And so we like him. And so there's a tendency, I think, when you know the person to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I would give Mark Cuban, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt anyway.
Yeah.
And I would give it to Mark Cuban anyway. But full disclosure, I think we have to say that. Like we have an inclination to want to give him the benefit. Hey, that's Mark Cuban. You feel like you know him. I think to a kind of a kind interpretation of the facts here, according to the SI.com article that details some of this stuff, is that a guy, Ussery is high up, wouldn't you say?
Yes,
right?
yes, he
That's
is.
close. And according to SI.com, Buddy Pittman, the head of HR, was hired to, according to a former employee, to save Ussery from himself, they said, given the culture of the organization.
Sure.
Now, Buddy Pittman, and I will quote from the SI.com article, when discussing the office culture to SI, former Mavericks employees, male and female, cited the team's HR office as part of the problem. Pittman has been known to take strong positions on social and political issues such as abortion and immigration, sending charged email messages to select staffers and friends that leave little doubt where he stands. And this includes issues about gay marriage, et cetera. So many of these employees may not have felt comfortable, according to the article, talking to the head of HR. In that case, Stephen A., quickly, if I may, I would say that the problem is twofold here. Mark Cuban made a hire of a guy that was problematic, and then another hire was made to address the first problem, but it turns out that came with a different set of problems that exacerbated the first problem.
Let's be clear about something here, Max, and you'll appreciate the position that I'm about to take. When we talk about Mark Cuban in this particular instance, it's just like I brought up the name Kerry Chandler, who used to work here. Whether it's ESPN, Fox, Comcast, Under Armour, Dallas Mavericks, NBA office, NFL office, or whatever the case may be. Usually when there's an HR issue, people don't talk about it. I've never spoken to any of those people about HR matters. You understand what I'm saying? Because that's not something you do. These are these are employment issues. People's careers are on the line. You never know what kind of residual impact can come from the words you speak and whom you speak those words to. And so when we look at it from that perspective, the reason I bring that up, Molly, and I want to go to you here, is because when we talk about Mark Cuban, I'm talking about Mark Cuban and what the hell is going on with that basketball team. That's what I'm thinking about. When it comes to something like this, I would perfectly understand why Mark Cuban wouldn't be in a position to say but so much about something like this. Because a lot of time in this day and age, we always want somebody to speak. I have never encountered somebody in HR or somebody outside of HR talking about an HR issue because of the residual impact that can ultimately come from it. To that, you say what?
So my ire is not directed towards Mark Cuban unless he was aware of what went down. And I'm not sure how it works there if the owner would be.
Well, what if he was aware and got rid of the guy?
If he's aware and got rid of him, I'm okay with it. That's exactly what
right.
it needs to do. But if these allegations are true, and the family of Turdima Ussery, I'm sorry for saying this, but he's an absolute pig. And the fact that this happened for 18 years is unfathomable. Again, it's so disappointing. And that's why when I hear the story, he went to Under Armour, and you mentioned your friend, I wrote down her name, Kerry Chandler. She was able to figure this out in 2 months. And for them, this went on for 18 years, this kind of behavior. And I just want people to be clear. If these allegations are accurate, it's not just sexual harassment. It's sexual assault. It's also touching employees
I'm giving Under Armour and Kerry Chandler credit because that was what was in the news. I've never spoken to her about it, but I'm giving them credit for what's in the news. If they were able, you got to believe, if they were able to...
2 decades, Steve.
There you go. There you go.
Unacceptable.
That's what I'm saying.
Unacceptable.